So there have obviously been a ton of games that Richmond have played so far this 2025 AFL season that have inspired me to really want to make this video. But of course, I think the most recent one of Richmond taking on GWS over at NG was the game that really told me that I got to make a video talking about how I honestly believe the Richmond Football Club rebuild is going well ahead of where it was expected to be. Again, there were a lot of people going into 2025 that had Richmond not even winning a game. Again, I think most of us Tiger fans were a little bit more optimistic that maybe we could, maybe we could steal one game, maybe we could steal two games, right? But I don't think any of us really thought that coming into round 13 at the time making this video, not only would the Tigers have 3 wins and we're only just halfway through the season, but the Tigers would have a couple of games under their belt now where they were actually really, really competitive. And I think the Richmond versus GWS game is the perfect example of that. Again, of course, the Richmond Football Club were pretty much beating the Giants pretty convincingly up until the boys, of course, ran out of steam, by the time the fourth quarter came around. Again, the Tigers were doing stuff that I just didn't expect to see throughout the game that really had me shocked. And not only was a lot of it by the young core, but a lot of it was by the veteran players that we, of course, had. Again, we were expected to get dominated throughout a lot of games this year, but one thing that, as a Tigers fan, I never really kind of thought is we haven't seen much at all of Tim Taranto, Jacob Hopper, and Dion Prestia all in the same team. Again, I think there's only been a couple games we've actually seen that, and we got one of these rare occurrences against the Giants where we got to see these veteran, more experienced players actually play together, with Dion Prestia returning from an injury and being absolutely insane. Again, the fact that this guy had 31 disposals and kicked a goal really just proved not only that he still belongs in the AFL, but also kind of proved the doubters wrong that he should retire. And I genuinely believe and hope, again, touch wood, if he was to stay healthy, he should be playing on next season, and so should, of course, Tom Lynch and Camden McIntosh, because we desperately need these leaders and these veteran players to continue to help the young core, because we are absolutely seeing the young core shine right before our eyes. Again, I want to put the attention on 2 players who I don't think have really played a good game for the Tigers yet until we got to the GWS game. Again, both of these guys have been fine. They've had a game where they've kicked a goal, had themselves like 8 disposals. But both of these guys actually looked at home and were doing things that I just hadn't seen them do against any other team until we got to GWS. And that was, of course, our 2 young key forwards, Thomas Sims and Jonty Fall. Again, both of these guys typically in every game have just been kind of staying in the forward 50. They've tried to move up the ground with little impact, not really doing anything at all. But again, Jonty Fall and Thomas Sims were not only both moving up the ground really, really well, but were both taking marks around the ground, and even a couple of contested marks here and there, just showing why the Tigers drafted these guys, and showing that, of course, it takes a long time for key forwards to develop. And I think this was the first game we really saw what Jonty Fall and, of course, Thomas Sims could be as AFL players, and I absolutely loved it. And again, they wouldn't be doing this if Tom Lynch wasn't in the team. In fact, we have seen when Tom Lynch is out of the team for the Tigers right now, and the pressure is on Jonty Fall, Thomas Sims, it is terrible. Like, these guys are 18, 19-year-old guys who are just not ready for that, that pressure to be on them. They're not experienced enough to be taking on a team's number 1 key defender. And not only can Tom Lynch take that pressure off them, but we saw against GWS, he had an absolute impact on the game and gave them the ability to move up the ground and actually find their own football. And again, Sam Taylor doesn't get beaten in one-on-ones often. And Tom Lynch beat him multiple times, kicked a couple goals on him, and just showed how much he's still got left in the tank. Dion Prestia showed how much he's still got left in the tank. The Tigers can't make the mistakes that I think they've done in previous years where guys have just retired, I think, way too early. Again, a couple of the players were not really their fault, but a guy like Josh Caddy retiring at 29 years old, yeah, he didn't look the part of it right then. It probably made sense back then. But having a guy like Josh Caddy right now would actually be very, very helpful. And that's why you kind of got to keep those guys like Camden McIntosh, Prestia, and Lynch. Like, not only are they still actually playing okay football, but I still think they've got some left in the tank and have experience to offer. So they were absolutely awesome. Again, the young key forwards, as I said, were so awesome. It was the best games I think I've seen them play. Our back line actually looked as solid as it's been. Again, our back line has been really good throughout the whole entire year. The only time our back line had one bad game was unfortunately against North Melbourne, and they lost by, I think, a goal or something the Tigers did. But if the Tigers back line played how they normally did, I think the Tigers could have beaten North by like 20 to 30 points. So that was an unfortunate one. But our backline was elite again, from top to bottom. Again, Sam Banks is turning into one of the better half-backs in the game. I mean, his defensive work seems to be okay. I'm not really an analyst to go into how his defensive work actually is. But as a player, offensively now, off that half-back line, which we haven't seen a whole lot of the Tigers have since Daniel Rioli got traded, we're actually seeing some run and carry from him, you know, now. His kicking actually is pretty solid. I think he's shown up in the meters gained, like top 5 a couple times now. He's been really, really good when it comes to that. So that's just another added bonus. You know, Caleb Smith, I have not been a fan of Caleb Smith, but I have to say, I think his last couple games, he's been pretty good as well. I mean, Luke Trainer's still a really good young key backman who will develop into something special. Campbell Gray actually looks really solid as well, and I don't know if he's going to be a starting backman going in the future, especially with Gibcus hopefully coming back and Bolter coming back, but he actually looks really solid as well. And if the worst thing he'll be is a really good depth player, I'm absolutely happy with that. Again, the Tigers were good top to bottom, right? I've talked about their veterans and I've talked about the younger players. But you got some of those guys who are coming into their prime now who are starting to be really good. Again, I talked about Hopper and Torreno kind of being veterans, but realistically, they've only just gone into their, what's supposed to be their prime. I mean, both of them are playing elite football. You also look at a guy like Hugo Ralphsmith, who is actually really turning up. He's one of those guys that really needed to come on now. He's had a lot of years in the system, and hopefully he should be heading into his prime now, and I really liked what I saw off the wing for him. Again, Tyler, Sonsi, we haven't seen him, I think, really play any good football in the AFL so far this year, but I actually think, especially his first half, looked really, really solid against GWS. Again, I think enough for him to keep his spot. You know, Ryan Mansell, I still kind of toss and turn about how much I really like him, because I think he does everything well, but there's just way too many times where he just doesn't hit the scoreboard. But I mean, he's another one of those guys who should be in his prime right now, or going into his prime, that is still looking okay. But yeah, there's a lot going on with the Tigers. I think it was very unfortunate that they lost against, of course, the GWS Giants, and there's still a ton to improve on. Again, don't get me wrong, Thomas Sims and Jonty Fall could come out next week and be booty cheeks, right? It's just the reality of things. But it's also in saying that, I think if they continue to stick with this young core, which they will, keep developing players, and then you kind of realize next year the Tigers should hopefully have Taj Houghton, of course, coming through, Josh Smiley coming through. Those, I think, are the two big ones. Josh Gibcus hopefully coming back. Some of these guys might play towards the end of the season, a Jasper Olga as well. But again, I think you're looking more at those guys for next year. Again, the 2 top 5 picks, what are they going to do with them? Are they going to be 2 top 5 picks? Or is that going to be potentially Harley Reid? Again, if you go into next year with this really good young core that you've got going on right now, and you were to add Taj Houghton, Josh Smiley, and Harley Reid, and Josh Gibcus, those 4 players, and I guess Noah Baltic, they didn't play, those 5 players is the team that you've got right now, move around a couple magnets here and there, I think you're going to have a really solid team that's going to hopefully compete for flags. So it's going to be very, very interesting to see again. I think the Tigers rebuild is very much ahead of schedule, and we don't want to get too ahead of ourselves. But as I said, if you add all those guys into it next year, I think they could climb the ladder. Again, we don't know. We don't want to get too ahead of ourselves, but I think the rebuild is actually well and truly ahead of schedule. So again, I'd very much like to hear all of your thoughts and opinions on this in the comment section down below. Who actually most shocked you guys against the GWS Giants? Did you guys like what you saw from most of the boys, or do you think some improvement still needs to be, made? Again, I'd very much like to know your thoughts and opinions. Subscribe to the channel for all the latest sports content, news, my gaming channel, which will be getting linked in the description down below as well. But yeah, as I was saying, please make sure to leave a like, subscribe, and comment, and I'll see you guys next time. Goodbye.